Welcome to Future Customer Value, where global thought leaders share their career-defining moments. Welcome to Future Customer Value. On the latest episode, I'm excited to introduce our guest, Cinthia Silva. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited for our conversation, and you bring a really interesting and unique background into the world of sales and post-sales, which I'm looking forward for our listener to hear today. So to kick things off, I want to introduce Cinthia and her career that's led her to our conversation today. So back in the day, Cinthia used to work in the world of financial services and banking. I think that's been a through line through most of your career. So kicking off doing a lot of trade desk work at Wells Fargo and KeyBank in the early 2000s. I learned a lot about derivatives trading from our pre-chat call, which I wasn't expecting to, but that's awesome, right? It always links into SaaS at some point. So really fascinating background that Cinthia had, which ultimately led her to working at IHS and Refinitiv, which are two companies a lot of folks in the fintech world will be familiar with. I actually used to work in fintech myself and came across those companies quite a bit. And during that era, that's when you really dove into the world of sales and SaaS and customer success and got into this whole land of value realization. And then most recently, Cinthia was at NASDAQ during the pandemic, where she was working on new products that NASDAQ had launched in trade surveillance and a bunch of other capabilities and was doing CS there. So Cinthia has had a great career and excited to learn more. So Cinthia, anything you'd want to dive in there with before we go into your stories?
No, I think you encapsulated that perfectly. It's like starting from banking and then kind of like coming full circle, coming to the tech space and bringing that banking background. So yeah, and you learned more
Yeah.
than you ever wanted to learn about interest rate swaps. So we won't belabor that topic here.
Yeah. Well, that's for another podcast, right? That's a
Exactly.
whole other situation. Awesome. This podcast is brought to you by Foresight, a full-service value realization platform designed to help you unlock growth in every single account. For more information on Foresight, please email them at info@gainforesight.co. That is info@gainforesight.co, and they'll be in touch. So let's go back down memory lane to your world at Wells Fargo and KeyBank when you were doing all the interest rate swapping, the trade desks, right? It was a tough lifestyle, and working in finance is pretty brutal. But talk to us about a moment there where you first had your foray into customer experience when it wasn't in the SaaS world, but you were working with customers of the bank. And what were some aha moments that led to, ultimately where you went after that? But talk to us about a time there.
Yeah, be happy to. And you're right. It was sort of that client facing roles. I think that there's once you do one client facing role, there are a bunch of similarities that go through all of them. Specifically on the banking side at both banks, I sat on trading desks. So as you can imagine, these are heavily regulated markets. And in order to stay compliant with the SEC, we would need to, determine credit worthiness of our customers, negotiate these massive agreements before we traded, and then haggle on the day of. It's completely stressful. It's very, very stressful. But and it was a lot about managing internal and external relationships, right? And so that was one of the things that I noticed, right away, how prevalent silos can be at companies. There's a lot of moving parts at companies, regardless of the size, because I've been at small companies, large companies, and there really can be silos there. And so to me, what I noticed there and what I've carried through, like through all my roles since then, is it's imperative that you figure out how to navigate those internal dynamics. Or ultimately, your customer is going to suffer. They're going to have a disjointed experience. And like I said, going back to like all the creditworthiness and these documents, if we didn't make that, that's already an arduous process. So if we're not working with our peers internally to try to like move that forward and make it easy for them, forget about it. The deals would be even much more painful to get closed. So really, I said, okay, well, this is simple. Let's just like start cultivating relationships with peers, what we call them the middle and back office. So these are the folks that and the teams that supported all client facing activities. They would get the contracts out, they would negotiate certain contracts, all these different people. And by the way, I had great relationships with our like loan servicing too, because that was part of the commercial loan side. And those poor people were just completely overwhelmed all the
Oh
time.
my
So if
goodness.
you came in as a friendly face, it
For
was a
sure.
good thing.
And there's so many stakeholders. I love the point you made about silos because no matter what industry or no matter what time or era that we operate in, silos are always ever present and they always cause issues. And on one hand, they're necessary. We need to have specialization for efficiency and all that. And you just mentioned the loan operations side versus the front of office, right? There's all these different components. But from the customer's perspective, they don't think about the world in silos. They think about a continuous experience. And if they're talking to you versus someone in the back office or someone in the middle office and they're getting a discrete experience, that's ultimately going to lead to, hey, why am I working with these folks? Why am I spending all my time and money here when I could be getting a better experience elsewhere? So I think that's such an important point. And I had my in my pre-called notes here, Joni. So tell us about Joni, right? She was someone I think in the loan side, and tell us about the relationship with her because I think that's a
Yeah,
great
yeah,
story
yeah.
for how we have to align internally to provide the best external customer experience.
Oh, 100%. I mean, especially especially at my first bank job when I was at Wells, there were so many moving parts and they had, banks love to do they gobble up other banks. And so there was there was very disjointed internally. So I basically was like, well, who's this person? Like there was like this woman Joni in loan servicing, right? And I was like, I just basically threw myself at her mercy. I was like, listen, I need to resolve this one issue. I tell me if I'm wrong. Are you the person that can help me work through XYZ? And because I came in that way, like, please, can you help me? That kind of help, help, help. She did. And then also too, what's nice is people like to share their knowledge. And I'll be like, and so I was like, so she kind of helped me work through this one problem. And I asked the question again, kind of like the discovery, internal discovery. So how exactly do you work in this space? Because I don't want to bug you with things that don't matter to you. Tell me like what I should be reaching out to you for and maybe some best practices so I don't drive you crazy. And she was like, oh, well, thanks. She was sort of taken aback and was like, oh, if you could do XYZ, keep an eye on this thing, blah, 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 blah.
Wow,
And I was like, boom, if I could win over some overworked person in that team,
for sure.
that's the key to, winning over everybody else.
And she's a customer too. She's an internal customer, and you have external come. Everybody is a customer to some degree. You want to serve someone so you can get something in return. That's a relationship, and it is. I think it's such a point that can be lost if you're not flexing that muscle and building that muscle with all the relationships around you in your professional world, so that you can be the best uh, customer success, customer experience, account management professional that you can be for the external world.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
100%. And plus, isn't it nice to be nice? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, let's
Yeah.
start there, right? Let's start there.
For
And
sure.
honestly, like that mindset has served me well across different companies because it helped me understand the value of collaboration, right? And if you engage with peers with that genuine curiosity, share knowledge with them, they'll share it with you. Look for ways to create joint wins. It's going to serve you, the team, the company, the customer. Everybody's going to win in that instance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the culture and the outlook that you have will reverberate and people will feel that and they'll respond to that. Which is so critical. And again, I feel like it gets lost when you're so in company mode and trying to get things done. Uh, but let's shift gears here to when you then took all that experience in the world of the trade desk customers and you moved into the tech world and the SaaS world and working at companies like IHS and Refinitiv, where now you were in a different type of sales process,
Mhm.
selling a product in addition to services. So talk to us about that world where you had to do much deeper discovery, in the sales side and better understand what your customers' needs were so
Yeah.
that you could serve them throughout your relationship with them.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great question too. I mean, really, IHS and Refinitiv were my first experiences in tech, and in both cases, I joined teams that were focused on new business sales. And it was also my first introduction to kind of that SaaS model of highly differentiated roles. I mean, prior to that, I was full cycle sales. I was a full cycle salesperson, so this was all new to me. And in both instances, I had an account manager who essentially did renewals and like any of the housekeeping, any of like the housekeeping questions and a CSM who acted as an SME because these are both fintechs and they typically are complex solutions, right? There's a lot of data, there's analytics, there's like just a bunch of tools that customers what we want them to do is fully leverage it, but they don't. So we do need that SME to kind of show them ways that they can customize that solution. And so my role was to bring in new customers and look for cross sell, upsell opportunities in the book of business. And when I went to go see customers, right? So obviously you're reaching, I was reaching out to the existing book of business, obviously talking to the account manager and the CSM to find out and get alignment internally, what's happened, because we know as much as we're supposed to use Salesforce, and I'm saying this as a salesperson, we don't always do the best job.
Right.
I was conditioned early, so I'm a fan of CRMs, but you can't always count on that. So starting with that alignment, so you don't go in blind, and then reaching out to the customers within the book of business to try to get like a temperature. And it wasn't a check-in, by the way, because I know a lot of times CSMs get a lot of heat for that, and they
For
should,
sure.
and any sales pro should, because really no one wants to be checked in on. It should be more about, I would call them portfolio reviews. I would say, hey, listen, I've just started covering your account. I'm doing a portfolio review. I would love to talk to you about the ways that, you're leveraging the solution. I have my ideas, but I really want to understand where there could be some gaps, and obviously, talk through those, make sure you're getting the full value. Even then, as a salesperson, just to get their attention. And in those days, it was all about like, you just wanted to go see and be with your customers, right?
For
Now,
sure.
Zoom is so much more prevalent. It's not as necessary, but that was the goal. It was to get that in-person meeting with them. And when I did, I chose to bring in my account managers and my CSMs whenever I could, because I positioned it as an asset to them. They had a full team supporting them. As we both know, it's a little noisy because there is such overlap between CSMs and account managers. And again, I was doing new business, upsell, cross sell, so the customers did get confused. So that was part of the reason I wanted them to meet us, to see us as humans.
I love that. And the fact that you took the extra intentional effort to do those portfolio reviews. And I think what strikes me about that is it's in the terms of the customer. A check-in is in the terms of the customer success manager. I need something from you, right? I want to make
Yeah,
sure that I can check off and say, I met with you and you're in good hands. But a review is, well, tell me about how things are going from your perspective, executive buyer. How do you feel you're getting value from our solution? What else should or you feel like you need to be doing that you're not doing? And I think it disarms the customer a little bit and gives them a chance to talk about it in a way that they want to, rather than a framework that might be more conducive to checking boxes. So
yeah.
that's really powerful. What did you in those portfolio reviews? How did you structure those? Did you have a type of playbook or template you'd use, or was it based off your knowledge of the customer? I'm curious. What was the structure and the way that you did those?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because basically what we tried to do is, obviously there's always like your main contact or that main stakeholder, but we wanted to get as many of the users and decision makers kind of in that meeting, especially for with some of the strategic accounts. We're like, they should be using more. Right. Let's get as many people. Let's bring lunch in. Right. Let's make it a lunch and learn. Lunch and learns were one of my favorite go-tos, by the way, because everybody likes free food at the office. It's
Yeah.
insane. Why is that, Salger? I mean, I don't know, but it's like you bring food and everybody's like, well, I'm going to go even if I had nothing to do with it. And I didn't care. I was like, come and sit in and learn about my tool. But those were ways to kind of just to like engage them further. But what we wanted to do, and again, with these complex solutions, it's tricky because you do have to be somewhat self-serving. You want to kind of highlight the solution, but you want to lead to the solution. So
Yes.
right, and so again, because of those conversations with the account manager and with the CSM, and we kind of like worked together to say, okay, let's talk about some tools that we like. First of all, we did usage reports, right? Like who's using it and what are, how long, when are they on there, what are they looking at, that sort of stuff. But then also too, what should they be using them? Because
Yes.
you might agree with this too, like customers love to know what peers, what they do, like what are the best practices, what are people just like
Absolutely.
me, right? And so that's what we would say. So we'd come in hot with that. So it wasn't just like, oh, here, let's just feature dump you. Who wants to be in on that meeting? What are you going to take away from that? It was much more, hey, we see that we're using it in this way. That's amazing. But we want to just highlight that XYZ, these data points, it's part of your subscription.
Yes.
These are some of the reporting that comes out. These are some of the things that your peers do, people just like you.
Oh
And
my
they were
God.
like, that was like gold, especially for the users and for the decision makers. They were just like, okay, good. All they care about is, are people using it and does it even matter? Should we be spending money on this?
Yeah. For sure. And I think this is such a trait of industries like financial services that are a bit more herd mentality than others. They want to know what their peers are up to. They want to know what's going on, right? What is the other organization on Wall Street? What is Wall Street doing that I'm not doing? And so I was in that world too, selling into private equity investment banking. And that was a main question, right? So I was selling a CRM platform, Salesforce competitor, to Goldman and Morgan and all these folks, right? And they were all, that's the number one question they'd ask. We'd be in our version of a portfolio review or QBR, EBR, value review. And back in the day, we would have these usage reports and all of the metrics and product roadmap. And I remember this one moment where we had this managing partner of one of the large private equity firms come into the room uh, late. He was coming out from a meeting. He said for 2 minutes, he said, look, stop all this. We don't care about, all we care about is what are the best practices that our peers are using your solution for that we're not doing today, because that's what we're paying you for. I want to know that value. And that
100%.
struck with us so deeply. And that's what's been, what's led to, everything that's happened since with Foresight and all of that. But it's those moments, right, that are the ahas that pause you in your tracks and make you realize, well, what does the customer actually value? How can we address that? But I love what you said there, which a lot of people don't point at, is it has to be self-serving. You're doing all this for a goal, right? You're trying to achieve an objective. You got to close a deal. You got to generate you got to put money on the table. You
Right.
you, you got to close that upsell, you got to close that renewal. But the way that you position that and frame it through the lens of the customer, that's the trick. Because people will go in and say, hey, I'm going to toss a bunch of software at your feature dump you, as you said. That's just not going to work. That buyers are smart. They tune up to it. They don't want that. It's also not valuable. It's not a win-win. It's not good relationship building. But if you can frame that in, I have something that I know that you need because these are the signals that I've received from your team. And here's what I'm hearing from your peers and your competitors, whoever that are using your solution and how they could be using it. Well, that's real value. So it's so important to have both hats on, right, when you're talking to a customer.
Oh, it really is. And trust me, and it's really hard though sometimes too to have that restraint to be like, because especially when, when a customer has buying signals, I just want to pounce. But you have to be like, oh, you have to like fall into that discovery mode, and it's that questions. Because we know if you ask the wrong questions, you're going to get the wrong answers. If you ask the right questions, you're going to get the right ones. And what do I mean by that? Wrong questions. Oh, you know, um, isn't the weather great? Do you like the how's your dog? Didn't you get it? No, that's all those niceties. It should be more like, how's the business going? How are you feeling about the tool? Are there specific questions, or what's changed within? That's one of the things that I like to ask every single time when I talk to a customer, an existing customer, and say, hey, Joe, it's been a couple months. I just wanted to update you on a couple of things, but before I start there, has anything changed? Because for all they just got acquired. This guy's leaving the
For sure.
company. The leader left. Whatever it might be, that is going to dramatically change the conversation. And that's information you want to know, because those are those unhappy surprises where like, oh my God, well, we were besties and the customer didn't renew. Well, you were asking probably the wrong questions or not
Yeah.
asking any of the tough ones.
Yeah, for sure. Man, and this is I hear this time and again where, especially on the CSM side, the post-sale side, folks are scared to have the value talk. They don't know how to engage on the level that the executive buyer or the champion needs to be engaged, and they don't know what questions to ask. And so they default to the easier questions, which are uh, about features or functions or usage, and how many people, or they're talking about themselves, right? That's the worst thing, is talking about yourself without having to give something in return. So how in your world have you seen both customer success and account management get upskilled to be able to ask those questions? Because I feel like you've done it naturally, given your background. You're so trained in that, and it's clear that you do that internally, externally, right, for companies. But when you were working with other teams or leading teams, how did you see upskilling to ask those questions come into play? Because that's such a
Yeah.
problem today.
Oh, I cannot agree with you more. And I think, it's interesting because again, I think, and I know I mentioned this to you before, like that's one of the benefits of being full cycle salesperson, because when you're making hundreds of cold calls, first of all, you're not afraid to have conversation. You're not afraid to have like like nothing's going to throw you like for a loop, because you're like, okay, I'm just going to pivot. Right. But again, if you're an account manager or a CSM, maybe you haven't been able to make those hundreds of cold calls. So how do you do it? I think it is with certain tools, right? Like, like those recording, Gong or something, whatever else, and listening to those calls. Because I think here's what's tricky. I think training is pertinent, right? Sales training. And I also think tools, particularly for CSMs, because the sales folks tend to get training, maybe, once a year, maybe more, depending what the organization is, but they definitely have tools. They have, Salesforce, they have Gong, they have all these other things. But CSMs are sort of an afterthought. And so like, I feel like there needs to be more of a focus on providing the same tools and more training around that. But having a tool, let's say like on like, or any sort of recording, software, is only good if you actually listen to the calls. And there was a point where I was, oh my goodness, at one point I was working, when I lived in the UK for a few years, and I was working at an events company, and we would literally record our calls and we'd have to listen to them. And this is like on a recording, like this wasn't Gong, this is pre that, but like with the team. So 10 of us in a room would listen to your call and just tear it apart. And it
Wow.
was painful. But you know
Yeah.
what? I wouldn't recommend that. You don't need to tear it apart, but it was painful, but it made you better. And so it's unfortunately sometimes when there are tools that are put in place, if you're just making the recordings and not listening to them and not reviewing them, like leader needs to be doing that with their team members, then that's a missed opportunity. And I also think too, like really, whether you're an individual contributor or a leader, you really need to invest in yourself. I 100% believe that. Early in my career, I used to think, hey, I'm going to join this company. It's up to them to train me. I'm going to work my butt off, but that
Yeah.
they have to show me what to do, right? Well, that's not a winning strategy, especially these days with the markets, the macroeconomics. It's so shaky, it's so strange right now. If you really want to make an impact and make a difference and make yourself sticky to your company, using things like reading books, listening to podcasts, attending
For sure.
webinars, right? Joining communities and learning that way, that's really how you're going to learn, because people share best practices. Just like our customers want to know best practices. Go talk to your peers and find out what those best practices are and upskill yourself as well, because that's also a way to manage up, because you're one less person that your leader has to train in that, and maybe you can focus on more strategic projects.
Absolutely. And this whole value identification that we are doing with customers, we have to index that for internal world. What does our company need from us? How can I upskill, uplevel myself to address those needs? Or also uh, identify new needs that nobody else is thinking about that I can uniquely own, right? And uh, there's a great article which I reference quite a bit from Ezra Zimbler at LinkedIn. He's what runs a CS team at LinkedIn, and he wrote this article that value. There's two dimensions of value. There's an internal dimension of value, which is understanding how valuable you are to your company and how you can increase that, and then how valuable your solution and you as a CSM are valuable to your customer. Because once we can connect those two things, those two sides, then the sky's the limit. But if we're not keeping tabs on both, then we're hindering our progress and growth. So I think it's a really, really strong point there. And a lot of folks uh, have, spent careers on learning, growing, experiencing key challenges, and then being able to share that through podcasts, which is why we're doing this, right? Is to be able to share
Right.
your experiences back with folks, and many leaders in our industry have written books and all of that. So yeah, very much encourage, or if you're listening to this, to do that, take that moment and upskill yourself, and um, you'll never look back after that. So
100%.
awesome. Well, let's fast forward here to your world after Refinitiv and IHS, where you were now in the customer success world exclusively, right? You had done sales in the trading floor, you had done sales in a SaaS environment, but now you were in the primarily post-sales world at Nasdaq. After Nasdaq had launched a new product, which is around the trade surveillance product. So, talk to us about that world where you were in customer success, working with a great leader, looking at health of customers and CSM sentiment, but realizing that that wasn't the full picture, right? You needed to understand the
Mhm.
impact and the benefit more so than your own feelings and sentiment of how your solution was helping the customer. So talk to us about that world, and what was that like?
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, my work at Nasdaq, was really impactful to me. It was a unique opportunity to help launch and scale a new CS team for their trade surveillance, Nasdaq trade surveillance solution. It's under the fintech division, and basically. The team was new, and so it felt like that startup environment within a large company. So that was amazing. And really I dove right in, and you're absolutely right. We had to start with really the basics, developing kind of a customer health index and then measuring our customers so we could figure out, okay, well, where do they fall? But customer health index, it's always so tricky, right? Because it's like some of it's customer, the CSM sentiment, and then all these other metrics from different areas. So we knew we're like, okay, we've got kind of like a Frankenstein of metrics, but let's go with it, and then we'll
Sure.
iterate as we go along, right? Um, and then the next thing we did is we collaborated with our marketing team and launched a video library because once again, a lot of financial solutions are complex. We were no different. Adoption was a priority. So we made these short videos based on distinct features and, put it out on our knowledge base. And our users loved it because it helped them actually with new, existing users that were, had issues adopting more advanced features, and for brand new joiners, right? They could like, hey, go there, go look at that library, start with that, because they're paying a lot for the tool. That tool, NTS is a leader in the trade surveillance space, so it's not cheap. So they definitely wanted to get the value on this. Next, right or wrong, NPS was a priority for our leadership. So, I leveraged my communities heavily in this and was like, what's a good way to optimize NPS? Because we know it's that one question, would you recommend this, which is 100% self-serving, and then a free form box. And you get very like not great feedback. So I implemented a dynamic question format, which based on how they responded to us, we said, oh, you're like, a detractor. What could we have done better? We didn't say you're a detractor, but yeah, like, we're sorry that we missed the mark. How could we do better? And got much more,
Wow.
better insights, right? Like responses that we could act on.
I want to double click into that NPS piece because we have my belief is that NPS is not good. It's a waste of time. I know it's a polarizing topic, but we got to take a stand, right? In our belief. Actually, I bought a website domain called cancelnps.com, which we're planning on doing a bunch of
So
guerrilla marketing
the
with down the
leaders
road.
love it. Like C-suite loves it. They're like, this is a metric that our customers
Yeah.
are talking to us, right? But
And
we
it's
know
great if you're, yeah, it's
it's
great
not.
if you're running like Jif peanut butter company and you want to ask your friends how much you like your peanut butter. But if you're selling $100,000 complex software, like good luck trying to boil that down to one number. And so I love that you recognize that, okay, yeah, our leadership needs this thing that the board is obsessed about, and whatever, it's become a metric that people want to track, but it's one dimensional, and it might tell you the what, it's not going to tell you the why. It's definitely not going to tell you the how. And so breaking that into a dynamic form, brilliant. What can we do about it? Great. You said you're 3.2. Well, how can we improve that, right? How can we take that to the next level? And I'm pretty biased, but we gotta create a different multi-dimensional way of doing this. Value perception score, right, a great alternative, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, so NPS, realizing that that's you have to play the game within to be able to build the team, but also putting your own unique spin and flavor on things to actually solve the problems that you're seeing. So, what were some of the challenges that you faced spinning up this team and making sure that you were trying to capture the customer sentiment and customer value, really concretely?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges, especially in the beginning, was no one internally really understood what our team was supposed to do, because once again there were account managers in place, and we had an implementation team because again this is a complex solution, and so there's a team that needs to get data from our customers and they need to clean it, but all the things. And so the CSM was sort of between that implementation and help with onboarding, and then the account manager. And so the CSMs at NASDAQ are more SMEs, right? So they were more like talking more specific about the product, but we still needed to get a better handle on what the state of their health was. So I think the biggest problem was making that distinction between CSMs and AMs, getting the buy-in from people to kind of see it as a value add and not service desk 2.0, right?
Right.
That's not what it was meant to be at all. It was meant to have deeper conversations. And also, again, adoption was a huge focus for us. So that's why we wanted to like really move fast with things like, well, digital strategies, right? That just makes sense. Like to get that video library up to help clients customer self-serve. And then I think also too, like, the customers themselves, there was confusion too. Like I mentioned earlier, when I would take my team to see clients when I was at IHS and Refinitiv, the customer would be like, so what do you do? And what do you do? And da-da-da-da. And I was like, what you need to think about is that you're at the center of everything we do. And as a CSM, we're like that central spoke with you. So when you have issues, we're going to help navigate it, but we're not just going to send you to someone. We're going to work with you to resolve those issues. And then also too, quite frankly, try to uncover leads, which we did, because when you're adding value to customers, they will start to talk to you about it. And if you're asking the right questions, once again, they'll like, well, actually, we're entering a new market. Like we probably need to add another market under our subscription. We want to talk about that, or we're doing XYZ.
Sure.
Those are the conversations that we could bring in the account managers for.
Love it. Love it. And that it's such a different role with based off the company that you're going into. Is there account management? Is there not? In some cases, CSM is the upsell team and the renewal team and the support team. In some cases, there's other teams for that, and CSMs are the SMEs, as you said. So I think it's really important to be aware of the world that you're going into and what are the unique value adds that you can provide to close the loop between the company and the customer and keep generating more value and ultimately revenue, right? As you said, uncover leads. So that's really powerful. Well, awesome stories. I want to transition us to the next part of our show here, which is a game we're going to play called the rapid fire question section. So, Cinthia, there's a couple rules here. I'm going to ask you 8 questions, and I want you to respond with the first thought that comes into your mind, right? So 3 words max. And it's designed to be rapid fire. So we're going to start with a couple questions on metrics and end with a few more questions around the future of customer success. Ready?
Yep, let's go.
All right, let's
Let's
do
do
it.
it.
So, Cinthia, what is the best metric of success for customer success?
Expansion revenue, definitely.
Love it. All right, big one here. What's the worst metric of success for
Oh,
CS?
we'll agree on this one. NPS.
There we go. Yes, yes. Resounding yes. Oh man, we need another
We
podcast
gotta have a
on.
separate conversation about
Yes,
NPS.
totally. Yeah, you can be our cancel NPS ambassador when we launch that. I will actually hit you up about that. Um, what is the most underrated part of customer success?
Oh, I think the CS community.
Yeah, for sure. Most overrated part of CS.
Oh, empathy as a skill.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
You've taught us a lot about that during this episode for sure. What is the current state of CS?
uh, I'm gonna break a rule. I'd say fragmented, but the future looks bright.
All right, great. Future of CS.
Oh, revenue alignment, 100%.
Absolutely. The best CS book or podcast.
This is a tough one because I have a lot, but there's a podcast, Psychology of Customer Success by Rachel Provan, which I would definitely recommend. It's really good.
Awesome. Yeah, she's been on the podcast as well, so she's one of our first early guests.
Oh, yeah, and her
Yeah,
her
she's a
podcast
great.
is really good.
Yeah, she's great. All right, and then final question here: what's the best community for leaders like yourself?
I would say one of my favorites, CxXchange.
CxXchange.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Jen Young's community. It's
Okay,
a,
great.
it's a active one, a lot of collaboration. Yeah,
Awesome.
CxXchange.
Perfect. Love it. All right. Well, we're the final questions here for you, Cinthia. This podcast is called Future Customer Value. So we always ask our guest about the future and what's going to happen. So if you could make one prediction about where our industry is heading, both technology and customer success and post sales, where do you think we're going?
Well, first of all, in terms of technology, I think, this is going to be like like a broken record, but AI, right? But I think it's going to be more about AI integration. I think right now people are trying to cobble AI on top of what they've already done. I think AI is going to absolutely be critical within customer success. And actually all across tech and all across probably all businesses. But I do think integration versus Frankenstein cobbling it on. And I also think that CS teams will need to and will start to tie themselves to revenue, just to demonstrate that value to the C-suite. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of overlap with AMs, so it's going to be a noisy transition. And in certain companies, maybe they'll pick one or the other. I really don't know. But in the end, I think it's the only way it's going to streamline the experience for customers and just create that alignment internally.
I really love the point about being thoughtful about how do you enable AI into your workflow and also align to revenue, because I think those two things are linked together as well. As there's such
Mm.
a problem of attribution across the board of how does an action lead to an upsell or identifying new revenue, and to be able to align that every action you're taking interaction is helping you to uncover, discover position and close more revenue and retain it is going to be so critical for this industry. So I very much agree with that, and we'll have to come back in a couple of years and see how much revenue alignment there really is, right, in this world, and
I
that's why,
know. It's out there now, and we're going to see right or wrong.
yeah,
We'll find out.
for sure. I know we got to push it forward, and that's really, a lot of great leaders and companies in the space are working towards that, and that's our belief as well. Is we got to make sure that customer success post sales is really a continuation of sales. It's not a breakout of anything else, and
I
we
love
need,
that. I do love that because you're right. That
yeah,
journey continues all the way through, and sales is part of it.
absolutely. Well, Cynthia, is there, as we're coming to the end here, is there anything you'd like to plug with our audience?
No, your audience, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I tend to post regularly about CS. And you'll also find me at different communities, like CxXchange, Latinos in Success, and CS in the Middle East. I'm on the steering committees for all of those communities, and I would definitely recommend them.
Awesome. Well, we will be sure to link that all out in the show notes here, and looking forward to continuing this in a part two soon. Thanks so much for
Thanks so
coming
much,
on,
Sagar.
Cynthia.
I love this
Yeah.
conversation. I could geek out on CS all day long. So thanks for that
Yes.
opportunity.
Same here, and we will do that. And cancel on PS coming to you one day. You heard it here first. All right, Cynthia. This was great. Thank you.
Once again, thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you by Foresight. If you're interested in learning more, please email them at info@gainforesight.co. That is info@gainforesight.co. Thank you.